So I guess thanks to Holly and their team from Unearthed for the opportunity for Louise and I to talk about this challenge. So this is the second challenge that we've run with Unearthed. The first was back in 2020 and was really around data science. Accessing multiple data sources and data layers and types of data, and then using that to identify areas of mineral prospectivity and new exploration models and targets. So probably a fairly sort of conventional challenge, I guess. And as part of that, we got an insight into the scope and scale of the global community that you can get ideas and engage with and get value from. So for us, it was a real learning experience. So we were successful in obtaining a second tranche of funds from the previous government to do another online challenge and again go back and engage with the global community. But at this time, we were starting to look at critical minerals as a strategy and as a sector in South Australia. We're starting to see lots of activity from companies exploring for critical minerals. The feds were starting to get active in critical minerals. So we were sort of looking at, well, what can we do from a department perspective to try and, kickstart some work in that space? We had companies exploring and a few other bits and pieces. So we decided to use this money again and go to the global community to try and generate ideas for South Australia, to develop critical minerals opportunities in South Australia. We didn't really want to go down the path of an exploration style challenge again. So we decided that, we would look at further along the supply chain and for opportunities to create value in the state and look to, really set up that, companies involved in critical minerals in the state. So we just go to the next slide. You're probably a bit off track here, but so I guess, you talk about states prospectivity. We've got 67% of Australia's copper, obviously a key mineral in the whole green transformation space, which critical minerals certainly play into. We've got a lot of graphite and a couple of developing projects, but also, prospective for a range of other minerals as well. I'm not quite sure why lithium's on there, but we will need to take that off the list, but that's okay. So as I said earlier, we're seeing lots of interest in critical minerals, but potentially a bit of a gap in terms of trying to coordinate that activity or focus potential opportunities in the state. So if you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I guess, we spent a lot of time, and I guess this was one of the pitfalls we faced quite early in the challenge, and we spent a lot of time talking with with Holly and Zane initially, and CSIRO and the universities as well, as well, how do we scope the challenge? Do we try and solve a particular challenge, a single challenge, like, how do you develop lithium processing in South Australia, or how do you establish a graphite processing plant in South Australia? But we sort of found that was really, really hard, given the whole sector is really in its infancy in the state. So we decided to eventually landed on, quite an open scope, which was really around, we just want ideas, projects and concepts that establish a supply chain in South Australia. It could be whatever capacity you want or position along that supply chain, but it was just to keep it open. And then, we've just sort of summarised the desired outputs there. A lot of it is about just introducing companies and technology to providers and interested participants in South Australia. So, really raising the awareness of the whole of any really opportunities in sort of processing, manufacturing, R&D, all those sort of various aspects of the supply chain. Establishing partnerships with organisations that are already here. South Australia's got a pretty world-renowned research capability, but there's lots of other little companies that are sort of dabbling in advanced manufacturing as well. So sort of trying to tap into that network as well. And then another part of it as well is by engaging with the global community, trying to identify some of those barriers to entry that people look and go, South Australia's too hard because of X, Y, and Z. Or, if South Australia did this, that'd be great. Or, we're coming to South Australia because they offer this. So again, just sort of trying to draw through some threads there that we can feed back into the broader department around, well, we've done this study, there's half a dozen companies that have identified these bottlenecks and these issues to come into South Australia. in relation to critical minerals in particular, but more broadly, what can we do about some of these issues? So go to the next slide. So these are just the stages here. So round one, so it was launched in November with really sort of quite a high level, quite a, not an overly specific requirements, I guess, for first round entry, just sort of preliminary ideas around projects and ideas. And then judging panel picked sort of across a range of sectors as well. So, space and technology, METS, high-end research, Office of the Chief Entrepreneur, Alex Blood, our Executive Director as well, so sort of from a department perspective. And then from that, shortlist was developed, and then, companies in that shortlist invited to submit for round two, which is just about to close, has closed now. And that was the more detailed business plan, sorry, Louise, feel free to jump in. I'm sort of struggling to capture what the details of round two.
Yes, at the moment we've got more detailed plans that will then be judged over the next month or so, and then we'll have the 5 winners that will be announced on the 8th of July.
Yeah, so round two, as I briefly touched on, is more about the detailed business plan, the benefit to South Australia, how you would establish your business in South Australia and interact with participants, because there's a range of participant programs on offering. Some of them are lab time for analytical programs, or assistance in seeking funding from various other launch pads and things like that to establish new businesses in the state. Also to business strategy, PR and marketing as well.
I might just have a flick on a couple of slides.
There, look at that.
There you go.
Yep. So I guess that's sort of and a small cash prize as well. So that sort of sums up nicely what the prize winners will receive.
Did you think the prizes, I don't know if we're allowed to jump in with questions. Do you think that people are motivated by the prize, or what do you think, how you choose a prize? What comes into that thinking?
Yeah, look, that's a good question. And we've had, lots of discussions with Unearthed and others around, what are people seeking when they enter these challenges? Are they motivated by money, or is it, the opportunity to be part of, a global network and just gain exposure that way? Let's be honest, $50,000 is not a huge amount of money if you're looking to relocate your business into South Australia. So for us, I think they're probably more interested in some of the partnerships that will spin out of this, particularly with some of the other government agencies as well, like Department of Trade and Investment. They've got a whole range of programs that you can get funding through as well. So it's sort of that introduction into that ecosystem in South Australia is what we probably believe is the carrot. Is that fair to say, Louise?
Yeah, I think so. It was interesting though that I think some of the research from the surveys that Unearthed did sort of in the early days actually indicated that even though it wasn't the biggest cash prize, that was the thing that most people were clicking as being the biggest driver for them to make their application. Although I think in the long term, it's probably going to be the incentive partnerships that are actually going to make the biggest difference to the business. So although the money might have drawn them in, I think the incentive partners are probably going to be the thing that makes it successful.
Yeah.
I might jump in quickly from the design perspective. I think we were really just trying to think from a business that might be situated abroad, like what would be the key things that could really support them to get started, and some of the recommendations that we've made. And that's just based on, I guess, the experiences we've had with supporting startups over the years. Like, what is the kind of, brand support, legal support, access to all those early customers. And it's been amazing to see all the different partners come together for this project to offer those kind of range of support to those businesses that are coming in. So I think that, like, as Rohan and Louise said, that's going to be a huge part of that value to help people get started and get early customers. And a lot of them, for example, don't even necessarily know how to set up a business here in Australia remotely and things like that. So it's all that kind of support.
Yeah. Sure, just move on to the communicate. Now I'll definitely hand over to you, Louise.
So I think we just wanted to show sort of what we got with this campaign, because we weren't, to be honest, when we started, we really weren't sure where it was going to end up because it was so different to the last challenge we'd done. So we did have a benchmark with what we'd done on that, but because this was such a niche challenge and wasn't going to hit on thousands of participants, we weren't really sure how we would go. So the fact that we reached over 107 million in campaign reach for PR was huge for us, and a lot more than we got with our previous challenge. I think the previous challenge might have been about 85 to 90, I think, for the Golar challenge that we did in 2020. So one thing we did realize with the results on this part was that we've clearly hit on something that's important to the industry. So we definitely kind of reached the campaign milestones we wanted to in terms of communications and market and reach. And that was our actual numbers in the end, which we were quite happy with. Again, when we started, we literally had no idea how many submissions we were going to get. We didn't know we were going to end up with 10, 100, 20, like we had no idea. We didn't even put a benchmark on it. So when we reached 40, we were actually quite happy with that number. And I think we had 40 good submissions as well. There weren't many in there that were terrible. So the quality was also there for that, and the participation has been good. And we've made sure to keep in touch with our participants, the 202, with other opportunities as well. And the 40, so we had 40 submissions that went to 11 through to round 2. So those ones that didn't go to round 2, we've also given them opportunities within other South Australian government departments that they can apply for. So whether that's other funding streams or other landing pads that they might be eligible for that aren't part of this. So we feel like we've still got those 40 submissions interested in the state, even though they won't go into the final and they won't be the final 5. And I think that was all our stats. Our final result, I think it's 8th of July that our final, the winners will be announced in our webinar. So until then, we're not really sure how it will end.
I don't know if you're able to share, but can you share anything about the kind of the range of companies and types of things that you saw come through? I'm not sure if we're able to share that one or not yet.
I can't comment on that because I'm not involved in the judging panel, but yeah, Louise, have you've seen sort of the list of entrants or?
I have, but not being a technical person, I'll be honest, it didn't mean a huge amount to me.
I think there's a bit of a spread, obviously I think, from discussions with Lizzie and Alex, there's a couple around mineral processing, sort of hyperspectral scanning, and also, some of the downstream applications around satellites and, sort of high-end use technology equipment as well. So a bit of a range, but I think probably the most sort of in that mineral processing and associated streams. One of the interesting,
so largely Mets then, Rohan.
Yeah, and
as opposed to miners.
Yeah, and that's, to be honest, that's probably what we sort of expected. We didn't expect a whole influx of mining companies saying, or even explorers saying, well, here's a novel idea to explore for critical minerals. We thought it would be focused in that sort of met testing space, because that seems to be a big issue with critical minerals is, how do you extract them from complex ores and things like that. So, we're not surprised by that. We worked pretty hard also with, our overseas Austrade offices to promote this challenge as well. That's been really successful for us. I've sat in on a critical minerals conference that was, based out of Australia, New York, and, it got mentioned in that by one of our trade members that South Australia is running this really cool online challenge looking to create opportunities in the supply chain. And there were heaps of people like, oh, that's really great. We've never heard of that being done before by a government agency. So, it's that sort of communication and reach, I guess, is an unexpected benefit. We'll get the challenge over and done with, and we'll pick the winners, but it's about creating that environment that, okay, with critical minerals, what are people doing in that space? And here we are sort of running innovative challenges, and I think it just differentiates us a little bit as well. So
yeah, the article concentration that you got 50 odd articles is quite good.
Yeah, and you look at sort of, where most of the reach has been, it's been in Canada and North America and through Europe as well, which is sort of, where most of the critical mineral sort of processing and focus is probably coming from as well. So again, not to be unexpected, but yeah.
How did you, I'm just thinking internally, how did you go about getting buy-in? Probably at 2 points. One is at the front end when you're putting the business case together, because with innovation, it's not determinate that, okay, this is the outcome that we're going to get. So be interested in your thoughts on that. And also, as you're going through the challenge, you've obviously got to get buy-in and time from people internally. So again, how did you go about ensuring that was, because that's a big part of it, how that was, worked successfully?
Yeah, so really, we were successful in getting funding for this largely off the back of the first challenge. We were the first government agency to do the the open source data science challenge, and the scale of that, and again, the number of people and variety of people from all over the planet that were interested in it, and just raising the profile of South Australia as an innovative destination for mineral explorers and data scientists, and drawing all those people together to have a crack and show interest in South Australia. So using that sort of philosophy, we just took it the next step further and said, well, increasing interest in critical minerals nationally, let's do another challenge, but just tighten the scope a little bit and focus on critical minerals based on the success and interest we've had in the data science challenge as well. So, and Unearthed as project partners, good reputation for managing and delivering this style of project. Done a lot of work with Oz Minerals and various other Newcrest and a whole bunch of companies around. So it helps having a recognised project partner as well. So a combination of factors. And then it's interesting. I remember sitting with a bunch of accountants from DPC trying to establish metrics for this project. And as you just said, innovation challenges where you're tapping into the global community are a bit like, who's going to bite on this one? So, I think we set 50 submissions, I think, as a target, and we got 40. So, that was a pretty good guess. But yeah, that ongoing engagement for this one has been pretty easy because of the focus on critical minerals. Everybody's talking about it. The Feds, Geoscience Australia, CSIRO, there's lots of money coming out of Canberra to support projects. So it's sort of been pretty easy to keep the motivation and keep the interest going. I will say one element that's been a bit challenging, I guess, is engaging with, so Canberra has the Critical Minerals Facilitation Office, which are largely tasked with, driving the national agenda around critical minerals. They were reluctant to come to the table to get on board with this project, and they have an incredibly high turnover of staff, which hasn't helped. But I think also, they sort of focus at shovel ready or, plant ready projects that, are going to come online, almost instantly are ready to go. Whereas ours is sort of, longer lead time. These are initial ideas and projects and concepts that could take, 5 to 10 years to come to fruition. So I think that probably, detracted the Feds, I guess, from getting, and they were happy to sort of help promote it, but didn't really get on board with it that much. It was a bit disappointing. They just struggled to engage with it. But yeah, as an idea and a concept, as soon as we started reaching out to other departments, and certainly the research institutions and universities in South Australia, they're really keen to get on board just because it's a growing area. So, but a fair comment, Louise, in terms of engagement?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the only thing we didn't factor in terms of working with others was just how long the process of getting the incentive partners on board could take. That there were a couple of incentive partners that never got over the line because of there were other government departments that had such long red tape processes that we had to get through before we could get an approval. And so actually one of them just never ended up happening because there was no way we would have gotten it done before the challenge was finished. So I think that was definitely something that we hadn't necessarily considered would take as long as it took to get done.
Yeah, great. I've got one other question, but is anyone else, rather than me hogging the, if anyone else had anything?
I was just wondering if you managed to sort of get the volumes that you need to establish like a mining centre of excellence in one of the locations in South Australia and those types of longer term outcomes.
Yeah, look, that's a really good question. And, again, leveraging off the back of, initiatives that have started through the feds, really, so through that Critical Minerals Facilitation Office, they've been pushing this hub and precinct model for critical minerals. So, we're doing a bit of work in the department at the moment that's looking at, well, what does that mean for South Australia? How can we have, a mineral processing facility next, near a mining operation in a resource-rich area with an R&D function nearby as well. So that we're really trying to grapple with what that looks like in South Australia at the moment. We've got elements of it. If you look at sort of, the Port Pirie area, for example, you've got an abundance of renewable energy, which companies want because it's cheap. We've got potentially a big water corridor pipeline being put in. There's a highly skilled workforce in the area. You've got a lot of other high-tech industry looking for that part of the world as well. So that sort of seems like a logical region. And then, you build the R&D to complement that area as well. So it's separate to this challenge, but linked in terms of that whole critical minerals strategy and story for South Australia.
Yeah, and you've got a forum, I suppose, that you can sense check that with newcomers as well.
Yeah, and that's certainly part of it. Is as we develop these ideas, and companies that are involved in this challenge as well will be, we will engage with even those that weren't successful in terms of, well, this is what we're thinking is next. What do you think? So we'll continue that relationship, and I guess that's the beauty of this sort of challenge is you just get introductions to a whole bunch of companies and people that you wouldn't even know existed. So that's another upside as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask I'm just thinking alternatives. So if you didn't use the open innovation challenge methodology, how else would you have done? Or what would you have done internally, or have you got other programs that you're seeking, trying to bring, in your case, trying to bring in or find innovators and then bring them to South Australia? Like, what other things complement, or have you tried previously? Or
I think with this one we probably would have struggled to get the global reach, without tapping into to the sort of the style of program. I mean, we would have probably gone down the pathway of contacting Mets Ignited and almost word of mouth type stuff, or it would have been hard work, and I just think we wouldn't have got the reach. As I said, we built this challenge off the back of our data science challenge. We'd had phenomenal global reach, so we'd sort of already established that path, I guess, for and that reputation of here's a government department that's looking to leverage off the global community for ideas. So I think if we hadn't have gone down the pathway we selected, we'd get a vastly different result, I think, and probably not the level of interest that we've got. I mean, I've sort of when I worked for a previous company in the private sector, we ran a whole series of internal and external challenges as well, just tapping to solve specific problems associated to various parts of the business. And I think almost all of them, the level of input and insight and ideas that you get far outweighs what you would generate internally. So I've always been a big believer in the power of others, I guess, to help you try and solve your challenges. So
yeah, cool.